Welcome to Sustainable Leadership Live. I'm Lisa Danforth, your host, and today we have the lovely Kymberli Speight. Kymberli, thank you so much for showing up and sharing your networking brilliance with us.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Before we jump in, I just want to share a little bit about Kymberli and why we have her here chatting. Kymberli is a professional speaker. She's an author and a workshop facilitator. She knows people do business with, promote, and hire people they know, like, and trust. But first, you must become known. Kymberli also believes that people's stories play a powerful role in changing the lives of others, and everyone, not just celebrities, has a story worth being told. She regularly speaks to audiences about networking and becoming more known, becoming more likable, and building trust. And today, Kymberli is going to be sharing with us networking for internal engagement, for business and business development, something I think we can all use. I was just sharing that with you in the green room before we went live. So I say, let's jump right in.
Absolutely. Well, Lisa, this is my topic that I just love to talk about, helping people get connected. A lot of times people are like, well, I've got to go to this networking meeting, but how do I do that? Right. So people know that they need to network, but what does that really mean? And a lot of times when I ask people, well, what does that term mean to you? I get all different kinds of answers. People have all different types of things that they associate with that word. Some of it's negative. It's like, oh, I'm trying to get something from someone. Or sometimes people are saying, I'm just trying to build my connections for business. And really the way I look at networking, it's really just about building relationships, pure and simple. That's all it is.
Why do we make so much out of it? I'd love to know, because I know I struggle with it. I can put myself out there, but it still can be a little difficult. What is it that gets in most people's way?
I think a lot of times what gets in people's way is they think about, okay, I've got to go to this networking event, right? Or I know that I need to network, and they put all this stress and pressure on themselves. Mm-hmm. And then they think, oh, I need to be interesting. So, how do I do that? And again, if you just get back to, it's just about building relationships. It's just about getting to know the other person. And if people look at it in terms of what can I give versus what can I get, I think it takes the stress off. And I think people a lot of times think I have to carry the conversation. And you really don't have to do a lot to keep a conversation going. So I think it's all of these connotations that people have in their mind about what networking is and how they need to do it versus just keeping it easy.
Yeah, I remember I actually saw Kymberli speak at the Maine Women's Conference back in, was it October, I think, of 2022. And one of the things that you said that I really took away was to be you don't necessarily have to be interesting. You need to be interested in the other person. And that really sort of lit a light bulb off for me.
Well, it's amazing because when you are interested in the other person, you automatically become interesting to that person, right? So it's asking questions, like an open-ended question, giving the other person a chance to take the answer in any direction that they want to take it in, and maybe asking them something that's positive, like, tell me, instead of, a lot of times people go, well, what do you do for work? Well, that's kind of, it's trite, right? But if you say something like, what are you doing that's interesting at work? Now that's positive, and the other person gets to think about, oh, what am I doing that's interesting? So they get to think about the thing that makes them really excited, and they'll go on and share with that whatever's going on at work that they find interesting. And then you just want to be curious more about that. Really, so tell me more about that, right? So you're letting that person take that conversation in whatever direction that they want to take it in versus you trying to figure out, okay, what question do I need to ask about whatever that is?
And then we're not present. Definitely. I've been absolutely guilty of that. We have Meredith Vachier, my pause partner. I have to carry the conversation. It's definitely a default for me. Meredith, same here. Do you find that with most people that it's like that's where they get tripped up of just talking?
I think they get tripped up with thinking that they have to carry the conversation. Mm-hmm. And I think they get tripped up with putting a lot of pressure on themselves. And I think we can do a couple of things to prepare ourselves before we go to some type of networking event. Like we can move maybe a value top of mind, or think of things that people have in common. And, so you can ask like a common question, like, tell me about your favorite vacation, right? That's a positive, open-ended question. Lots of people have taken a vacation. So that's a great starter. They can think about, okay, so what was my favorite one? And then they will share about that particular vacation. And there's no ulterior motive. There's no, I'm trying to get something from you. Mm-hmm. It's just trying to show up and learn about the other person and be genuine.
Be that authentic, build trust. those types of very, very important things. Yeah.
Yes, yes. And I think the other thing that people put on themselves when they go to a networking event is they think, I've got to meet 20 people or I'm going to walk away with 20 business cards, right? It's just like, in order to make it worth my while, I've got to meet all these people. But I think if you would just go with the intention of meeting 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 5 people, having a really intentional conversation with those 3 to 5 people, you would be amazed at what can come out of those 3 to 5 really great connections. Because then you can, after the event, you can get their contact information. You've had a great conversation. So then you can continue the conversation, connect with them on LinkedIn or Facebook, continue the conversation, maybe set up a one-on-one. And I think that is going to be a lot more fruitful.
I love that. It puts so much less pressure on us, just a few people. I remember you sharing a story about, was it meeting 100 people in 100 days or some type of amazing networking? Can you just share about that and how that impacted you?
Absolutely. Oh my gosh, it was an amazing experience. So I met 100 people in 100 days. And what I did was as I was going about my life, right? I wasn't going out of my way a whole lot, except for like I work from home. So sometimes I had to be intentional about leaving my house, right? But because you can't meet anybody, I mean, except for on Zoom. I mean, I meet people in trainings on Zoom and you can do it there too. But it was just about paying attention to the people that came across my path. And then noticing maybe something that I might have had in common with them. Like if I was cold and they were cold, I would say, oh my gosh, it's cold in here, isn't it? Right. So finding a commonality, and that would strike up the conversation.
So simple. We make it so darn hard.
We do.
Meredith says, is there a length of time that you should spend with someone? I'm always worried that I need to circulate. I think that's a great question. That was going through my mind as well, Meredith. So thank you for putting it out there.
So I would say if you're going to a networking event and you know that there's somebody in particular that you want to meet, right? Then, you might want to be strategic in terms of, before I leave, I want to meet this one person, right? But if the networking event is an hour, and if your goal is to meet 3 to 4 to 5 people, then I think a 10-minute conversation would be great. And you can also pay attention to other people's body language. Like if they start fidgeting or if they start like their eyes start darting around, then okay, they're wanting to end the conversation. But what I find that though is if you're letting people take the conversation in the direction that they want to take it in, oftentimes they're willing to have a lengthy conversation. Mm-hmm. So it's really kind of going to be up to you in terms of, if you have decided, okay, this has been a really great conversation and you want to meet 3 or 4 or 5 people, then, gauge your time accordingly like that, I would think. The other thing you can pay attention to is, again, the body language. If people start to back up, that means they're kind of decommitting from the conversation. So that's a cue as well.
That is a big cue. Absolutely. Yeah. I have one question to deepen on this as well, but when someone is talking and talking and talking and talking, and you'd like to meet a few other people, what are some gracious ways that we could stop the conversation, move on, and not be rude or disrespectful?
That's a really great point, Lisa. I think a really gracious way is just to put your hand out and say, it has been lovely talking with you. I hope that we can carry on this conversation a little bit later. So you just put your hand out. It's so lovely to have this conversation with you. I'm so delighted to have met you, and hopefully we can catch up again a little bit later or, at another time. What I don't recommend is people say something along the lines of, well, I really need to mingle and meet a few more people, because that is kind of like you're telling the other person, I'm not interested, right?
Right, but sometimes it's the only thing that comes to mind. That is great because it's that breaker and lets the person know in a very, very respectful way. Right. What are some other tips that you have for people who are going to, I was sharing with you in the green room, I'm going to a networking event tonight where I won't know most of the people. I know you offered a couple of different questions, but are there other ways that we could prepare to get ourselves sort of psyched up for some conversations or some other pointers?
Sure. First of all, when you enter the room, right, so people are attracted to confidence. So walk in fact, a very confident posture is with your head up, chest out, shoulders back and down. So you want to walk in very confidently because that's going to attract people to you. Now, if you see somebody of course, you could just wave and walk straight over to them. That would be easy, right? But oftentimes we don't know somebody else in the room. So I would suggest go to a high traffic area. Like if there's a food table, that would be a great area to go to because it gives you a chance to kind of pause and you're putting things on your plate. And as other people walk up right beside you, that would be a perfect opportunity to just start a conversation. You could say, well, what brought you here tonight? Do you know of anybody else that's here? So those are a couple of questions you can just prepare for yourself ahead of time. But you could also start talking about something on the table, like, oh, have you tried that? And point to something on the table. So just easy way, just simple, right? And then after you have finished getting your plate, then I recommend just standing a couple of feet away from the table, because the next person coming through is looking for a place to land. And now you've made yourself available.
Ooh, that's a good one, Kymberli. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So again, it's just simple. And if so let's say you've stepped away from the table and maybe nobody's coming through the line, you got there early. Another thing you could do is look for, when you see people standing together, are their feet face to face? If they're face to face, they could be in a committed conversation. So that would be a little bit harder to enter. But if people have their feet at an angle, that is kind of like an invitation to enter the conversation. So that would be an easier entry point.
That was one thing I wanted to ask you as well, going back to the body language, because if you're walking into a room and everyone is in triads or facing each other, it is difficult to kind of like break in. Can you give a few additional tips on that? Because I have heard from so many people that it's just like they're uncomfortable to join in on a conversation, so they wind up leaving.
Right. So, okay. So again, if you see somebody with their feet open, two people, then you could just walk up, or say there's a person standing by themselves. That would be an ideal person to walk up to, right? And you could just say, hey, may I join you? Very simple, right? And then just listen a little bit to the conversation. And then, because you've asked if you could join, when somebody makes a statement, if you will just make a statement based on what they've said, and then that will, then you're you're telling the other person, I heard you, I was paying attention.
Mm-hmm.
And then that also gives them a chance to then continue on with that conversation. And again, because they're feeling like they've been heard, now you've essentially entered the conversation without maybe taking it in a totally different direction. So that would be easy.
And listening definitely builds that trust, right? And that connection, which we need in business development, just being able to reach out there. Can you talk a bit about networking specifically for business development? I mean, do we start with the very, very general questions? Do you jump in and be a little more professional?
Okay. So again, even networking for business development, again, people do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. So in these conversations, your goal is to become more known and to become more liked. So again, if you're asking people questions, open-ended questions about themselves, asking questions, maybe bringing up a value that top of mind that maybe they might have as well, right? And you're just getting to know the person. So you're not trying to close a deal right there. You're just trying to become known and likable. And one thing about becoming likable is when you find that you have things in common with somebody else, that creates likability. Now, I know before we started, Lisa, you and I were talking about our sons, right? You asked me about the picture behind me. So those are sons. And I said, yes. And then you asked me about them. Well, now I'm liking you more because you're interested in something that's really important to me. And then I said, you mentioned something. I said, well, that you had two children. I said, so are they both boys? So now we're striking up this conversation over something totally not business related at all, but we're creating the bond of likability. Now, as I get to know you more, right, I'm asking more questions or listening, actually more intentionally listening, and then making statements based on what you say. Now I'm getting to know more about you. And then as I find that you have what I need, when I need it, I'm going to come to you for my business. Right. So I've gotten clients, I've gotten speaking engagements just by having conversations with people, building the relationship. And then over time, they find out what I do. So I'm not putting it out there, oh, I'm a speaker, I'm doing this, or I'm looking for these types of leads. I just have these conversations, ask people about themselves, and then conversations tend to be reciprocal. So as you ask people questions about themselves, they will reciprocate and ask questions about you as well. And then they find out about what you do.
Yeah, I'm really hearing, again, I'm coming back to, we always make it so difficult, but it's whether it's business, whether it's personal, just out there, just meeting people in a group party or something, that it's truly just conversation, being present and being authentic. And it doesn't matter, because I think I do speak with people who are, and I've certainly experienced this, where when it becomes business, we feel like we need to be a little bit more buttoned up. But the most beneficial thing is to just simply be.
Be yourself. listen. And then as you're listening to what people are talking about, you might hear of things that they need. And so the other part is, to me, networking is not about what can I get, it's about what can I give.
Mm-hmm.
So as I'm having a conversation and I hear that you might need something, well, what do I have that I could give, that I'm willing to give freely, that I could be of help to you? And then as I do that again, then now I'm building social capital. So when I think about networking and building relationships, I often break it down into, it's building social capital, which is being able to give what you're willing to give that the other person finds value in,
Mm-hmm.
and it's non-monetary. So if you're willing to give your time, your knowledge, your expertise, insight, what is it? And just maybe compliments too. What are you willing to give? So that's the first part. And then it's just paying attention to the people that come across your path. And then it's paying attention to every single human interaction that you have with somebody. So are you coming across genuine? Are you coming across authentic? Or are you coming across like you're trying to get something from somebody?
Can you talk a little bit about the follow-up afterwards? Because I know that's something that you talked about when you met the 100 people and the ways that you stayed in touch with them, because that's every bit as much as important, I believe.
Right. That's the number one thing people fail to do, is they fail to follow up, right? Mm-hmm. So again, it gets back to, if you're going to a networking event, if your goal is to meet 3 to 5 people instead of 20, right? Now you've had an intentional conversation. You've heard some things about them that now it would be very easy to continue the conversation later. So get their contact information. It could just be something like, are you on LinkedIn? If you have a really great conversation and it's even warmer, then you could say, hey, are you on Facebook, or are you on Instagram? So you connect with them very easily on social media, or get their email, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. So then it's incumbent upon you to stay top of mind. So you could circle back to them. Hey, I had a great conversation with you at such and such an event where we talked about such and such. So what you talked about was something that was important to them.
Right.
Right. So that's the follow-up. And then, like, if you connect on social media, then it's very easy, as they are posting things. If there's somebody that posts something, it would be very easy to start engaging with their posts. Just, the emojis, or making a comment. So now you're building that rapport, and that is following up with people. And if you heard that there was something that they needed, or they mentioned something casually, you could perhaps send an email or an in-mail or a message, something private, and say, when I met you at such and such, you mentioned such and such. So whatever it was they were talking about, I came across this article. I thought it might be helpful for you. It could be something very simple, but you're giving value to them.
That's something that I do often, because I'm a voracious reader. I'm always finding articles or books or whatnot. And it is such a great way to just stay in touch, be of service, and not ask anything. Even if they don't respond, I've had people respond after 3 or 4 and started the conversation back up, which is great.
That's perfect.
What do you do when you have waited 2 or 3 months or 6 months after you've met someone at a networking event? Do you just drop it? What do you recommend from there? If people are like, gosh.
So as you're building that relationship with people, right? I don't think, because you've been a giver, right? You've been giving. If there's something that you need, and that something small, something that they can do, it's perfectly fine to ask for a small favor, right? You have built the relationship. Even if it's somebody that you met the first time and they mentioned that they knew of somebody, or something that you thought that they could help you with that's small, then feel free to ask for that small favor. Oftentimes when people can do something for you, that makes them feel good, right? It's like if I said, Lisa, I had a great time meeting you at the Maine Women Conference, and I see that you, we talked about, such and such. Can I have 5 minutes to ask you a little bit more about that, right? If we had a great conversation at the conference, 5 or 10 minutes, and then I asked for 5 minutes of your time, because you know me and we've built up that rapport, chances are you're going to have no problem saying, oh, sure, Kim, I'd be happy to give you 5 minutes, right?
Right. But what happens when you drop the ball from networking and it's 3-6 months later, and you're like, gosh, I really would love to connect. Do you?
Certainly. So then I would just reach back out to them and say, Lisa, we met 3 months ago at the Maine Women's Conference. So you want to give them some markers, right? Help remind them. And then you can say, and we talked about, right? So bring something up top of mind. I dropped the ball. I would just love to reconnect with you on and talk, just, you can maybe go through their LinkedIn profile. Maybe you take the time to go through their Facebook feed to see what they've been talking about. And maybe you could bring something up that they're, again, drawing the commonalities again. But you could certainly say, I'm sorry, I dropped the ball and I just would like to reconnect.
Just honesty and putting it out there. I know with my clients, a lot of them will be like, they don't necessarily have a CRM. They'll drop the ball and then they just simply won't follow up. And that is just such a hard thing to convince people to get back out and start the conversation. But it sounds like it's truly the same way, following back up 98% as the initial, if it was the week before or the day before.
Right. It's just taking the initiative. I always tell people you need to be the CEO of you. So you need to be proactive, right? If it's for business, you're trying to generate those leads, if it's trying to establish those relationships, you really do have to be the one that's being proactive and taking the initiative to build those relationships with people.
Great tips, great conversation insights. This has been absolutely phenomenal. I'm going to take some of these and put them into work tonight for me, put them into place.
Lisa, you're going to be awesome. You're going to be awesome.
I'm like, hey, see, I timed it just right.
You did perfect.
So is there anything that we didn't talk about that you'd like to make sure that people know or hear before we wrap things up?
I would say really just, be comfortable in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If you own who you are as a person, if you value who you are as a person, right, then you have a lot to offer people. Just your presence, just getting to know someone, right? And also looking at other people in terms of they are valuable. So it's not, a lot of times I think people try to calculate who should I meet, but you can miss out on so many opportunities because even if that one person does not have exactly what it is you need, people know other people and great people know other great people. So I would say just, show up with the intention of being present, with the idea of just wanting to get to know the other person, and don't calculate the return on investment before you decide to meet somebody. I think that will be valuable.
So simple, so valuable, so incredibly impactful. Meredith says, thank you. Thank you for joining us today, Meredith. Really appreciate it. All right. So I would love to know, what is one boundary or habit that has helped you stay in this networking game that's really supported in sustaining you continuing and just taking this and running with it?
I think one thing that helps me stay in touch with people, so like something that's very easy. If I've connected with somebody on Facebook, then once a year, I have an opportunity to stay in touch with them because their birthday comes around and Facebook tells me it's their birthday, right? So it's a perfect opportunity to at least once a year, right? So that's kind of a systemic way. And when I reach out to somebody on their birthday, I don't post on their wall because everybody else is posting on their wall.
So true.
I will send them a private message because, again, I want them to know that I see them and that they're valuable. So I'll send them a private message and it's simple. It's just like, happy birthday. Do you have anything exciting going on this year or any special plans for this year? If I know that they are an animal enthusiast, I might send them a gift that has, the GIF that has an animal or something along those lines. But I try to make it personal. It still doesn't take that much time though, because in a given morning, I might get a notification that it's 3 or 4 or 5 people's birthdays. It maybe takes me, 2 minutes to send a personal happy birthday message. And I almost always get a reply back. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is that's kind of serendipity is that when you see people posting things, instead of just, oh, you saw their post, I have a lot of people tell me later, oh, Kim, I see that you're doing XYZ. And it's like, I've not heard from them in a year. And they go, I'm watching you. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, that's
good to know.
So if you see somebody post something every now and again, just, say hi or give them a thumbs up. So that's kind of as things come across your feed, be intentional because it does take a little bit, right, to maintain relationships. It just takes a little bit of intentionality and it does not take a lot of time.
I love all of that because we can get so busy and we don't think about it, but just that quick pause, like, comment, this has been great, whatever it is, that is super powerful, Kymberli. Thank you. Thank you.
You're very welcome. Lisa, let me share one thing that's real quick to do that because people are so busy, right? I think multitasking, I do that, right? So if you're going for a walk, why not, you're listening to music, but why not just something like when it's safe, when you're not crossing the street, maybe just scroll and you could like look at people's, or you're on, if you're flying somewhere,
Mhm.
Or just, as you're going about and you have these little pauses, you're sitting in a doctor's office, you're waiting.
Standing alone at the grocery store.
Standing alone, perfect, right? So I think multitasking can help with time that way for people who are really busy.
I love that. Making it easy. It's easy and simple. That's fabulous. Where can people reach out to you, connect with you? Is there a social platform and your website and all of that?
Sure. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, just my name, Kymberli Speight. So my name is spelled a little bit differently, Kymberli. So the Y and I are reversed. But Kymberli Speight on LinkedIn for sure. Instagram, I'm on Facebook. And they can also find me on my website, KymberliSpeight.com. And if they're interested, I have a free download for chapter 13 of my book, which is things that I learned, tips I learned along the way, steps for networking.
Would you mind posting that in the LinkedIn chat at the live afterwards, just so that people can have access to it? Just like a direct link, that would be great, because I know it would be super helpful.
Happy to do that, Lisa.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate it. All right. Next week, June 7th, which just blows my mind. We are halfway through the year. I have Lori Blatt joining me. Please join next Wednesday, the June 7th at 11 a.m. East Coast, 8 a.m. Pacific for a conversation, and we will see you then. Kymberli, thanks again. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you for having me, Lisa.